Welcome to Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'm your host, Richard A. Klatte. Honored to have McKenzie Rae, author of the Dysfunctional series, a 3-part book, all in one. McKenzie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I understand you're a local fantasy writer from the Twin Cities area. Maybe we could start giving us a little information on your background and how you got interested in becoming a fantasy writer.
Sure. I grew up in Coon Rapids, so right in the area. My mom read a lot of the Harry Potter books to me while I was growing up, so that's how I really got interested in
great place
fantasy
to
stories.
start.
Yeah. That was pretty much my childhood, was those books.
Wonderful. So did you start this when you were in high school? I mean, you're awfully young. You already got your first book out, and and 3 books in one. How did this all happen that you got 3 books in one here?
That was the publisher's choice to bundle them all at once. So I had already written all 3 books by the time that this was published.
Really?
Yeah. I started the first one when I was in college.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, it took me about 2 to 3 months to complete each novel.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. Did this just come to you? What was the initiative that got you interested in fantasy? I mean, it's maybe some people would start with small, short story writing or something, but you go right into a fantastic novel.
I had the idea for the characters first. So as a teenager and a young adult, I got really into superheroes. So I knew that I wanted to have 3 teenage superheroes be the main characters. And from there, I built the story around them. And as I kept building onto it, it was going to be, there was way too much information to just have a short story. So I already knew it was going to have to be a novel, at least one.
Right. Well, how did you, this day and age, did you send the manuscript off to different places, or how did you have somebody lined up? How did this get published?
I tried sending the manuscript to several different smaller independent publishing houses first, and the issue is that if you don't have an agent, you never really hear back from anybody.
Sure.
And so after that, I figured that the only way that these stories were going to get out there was if I did something with them myself. So, if that was self-publishing, great, but first I wanted to get some feedback on the stories. So I went with some online platforms first, like Fiction Press and Wattpad, and then I put these onto Inkit. And they're an online platform, but they're also a small publishing company. So they collected data on my stories to see how the readers liked it, and eventually, when it got moderately successful on their site, they offered me a contract. So that's how that came about.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, before we get too far ahead of us, I want to a little bit more on your background. I mean, did you grow up watching sci-fi horror movies or fantasies? What kind of movies did you like when you were growing up? I know did you watch the Harry Potter films?
I did, yeah. I'm pretty sure I saw all of those in theater when they came out. I didn't really watch anything scary when I was younger. Like I remember watching The Nightmare Before Christmas, and that freaked me out.
Right.
So it was mostly like Harry Potter. I remember seeing, when I was a little bit older, I saw Lord of the Rings, those movies when they came out too. So that's really how I got more into fantasy. I didn't get interested in some of the scarier aspects of my book in particular until I was, like a teenager or a young adult, and that's more when I started watching horror and reading horror.
Okay. Well, of course, your characters are in high school, so they're going through the angst of growing up and going through different stages of their lives, of course. So, what are these characters based on anybody you know, or not that I mean, they're fictionalized, I'm sure, but but still, you got to react to the people you've grown up around. I mean, you must have had some input from them.
I think a lot of the characterization was just aspects of myself that I put into them, but I know I told some of my friends that bits and pieces of dialogue between characters, a lot of that was influenced by just how I talked to my friends and my family. So I told them before it came out, I was like, you might recognize this piece of dialogue when you read the book.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, you got characters, one character is Well, we're not sure what's going on. Of course, I mean, the characters are developing and they're getting these superpowers, and you're not sure how they're getting them. This one guy, believe the first person we get into is he's trying to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And he can't die.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
So as long as he
Was that Theo? Or?
Yeah, that was Theo. And as long as he wants to die, he can't. But if he is sacrificing himself for one of his friends or someone he cares about, then he can.
Okay. And then there's Ruben. He touches people. He can get their inner feelings.
Yeah,
and touchy-feely character.
So without his superpowers, he's very unempathetic and doesn't understand how people feel. But his superpower allows him to literally put himself into somebody else's shoes by skin contact.
Right. Then there's Sally. She is a very interesting character that she finds out that if she sticks her finger in an electric socket, she gets rejuvenated or something. Do I have that right? I mean, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself there.
She has sporadic fatal insomnia, so she just stopped sleeping, and it's incurable, but then when she gets her superpower, she's able to use electricity to sort of recharge herself like a battery so that she doesn't need sleep anymore.
Yeah, there's some good comic stuff going on there where they hook her up to batteries and stuff.
Yeah.
That's really well done. And
Thank
I'm
you.
really excited about that. Well, then, of course, there's a counselor that
Yes,
Ms.
the guidance
Briggs,
counselor, Miss Briggs.
and we find out that she's up to no good. She's sapping into the youth and stealing their.
Yeah.
That's how she stays young, I understand.
Yes, so that's how she gets her beauty, and if she doesn't sort of sap the life out of these people that she chooses, she'll die herself.
Right. Well, that's the essence of the first book. You're developing the characters, seeing where they're going, then slowly there's really nice twists and turns just when you think you're starting to understand what's going on. Then you'll bring in another character. Then there's the Shadow Man appears.
Yes.
He's not fully developed yet in the first book. Is that true?
Yeah, he doesn't have much of a part to play in the first book.
He's just kind of coming and going, and you're still trying to figure out what he's all about. In the first book.
Sort of like that devil at the crossroads character where you can make a deal with him, but there's always going to be strings attached.
Right.
And so that's how the guidance counselor, Miss Briggs, gets her powers initially. And then there's a character later in the book that also has superpowers that she acquired from making a deal with the Shadow Man.
We're talking about this woman is really a basket case. And she's in the first book. Basically tonight we're concentrating on that first book.
Right.
And maybe we'll have you back here because this could be a 3-part series right here. I mean, this is really involved. It's really exciting. I really enjoyed the first book. And we just got some minor characters. You've got Jane and Ronnie. They're kind of just side characters.
Right. Jane also has superpowers, but for most of book one, or maybe all of book one, I can't quite remember myself, but she doesn't actually meet the 3 main characters until later.
Okay, right. And then Cassidy Williams, she's been zapped, and she's in the hospital.
Yes, she's one of the victims of the guidance counselor, Miss Briggs.
So I'm really interested in how these started. Did you have like an outline? You just briefly mentioned that you started slowly, then you said, it was never going to be a short story, so this thing just took off on you. And,
This is one of those stories that I didn't outline. I kind of go back and forth. Some stories that I write, I'll do like a chapter by chapter outline, but this is one of those ones where I had the idea for the characters, and I knew that I wanted them to have superpowers that sort of fixed their worst flaws that they had, and from there I just sort of built the story in my head first. I don't think I really wrote anything down to outline it.
Okay. Well, and it's really interesting that you're from this area. Most importantly, we always want to make sure people know how to get your book. Can they go online? You have a web page, or?
The easiest way to get my book is to just go on Amazon and buy it. So if you search for McKenzie Rae or Dysfunctional, it should be one of the results there.
Well, that's great. Okay, and it's very important that people can reach you, do you go to any like these? I mean, they have the Comic-Con or these other big sci-fi things like they'll have Star Trek conventions, or do you have to go into these? Do you belong to any book clubs?
I haven't been to many of these events. I did one recently, the local author fair that was at the Northtown Library branch that they put on, and that was really the first event that I did. But
really?
Yeah, I'm looking for new events to do, but I don't have anything really lined up. I'd say the best way to get in touch with me if people just want to talk would be my Facebook page. Other than that, I don't have much set up yet. I'm still new to this.
All right. Oh, I understand that. Well, there's another little twist there that you reference the Wizard of Oz. That kind of, how did that come about?
I didn't really plan it. It was kind of by accident, but the lion, the Tin Man, and the wizard and all those people like the Scarecrow, they kind of fit in with my three main characters plus Jane Hopkins, who's off on her own. Like the Tin Man I compared to Reuben, who couldn't empathize with anybody, and Sally had something wrong with her brain, so she was the Scarecrow.
Right.
And yeah, it just kind of was one of those things that as I was writing, it became more obvious that I was drawing parallels to that.
Okay.
But I didn't consciously plan that out at first.
Well, maybe we should go back a little bit. I think you briefly mentioned that you started writing in high school. And what kind of project did you, is that just creative writing classes or something? Or?
Yeah, I took creative writing classes in high school, but I never really finished anything. I did a couple of short stories, but those were for classes. And I remember the first book I finished was after high school, and I think after college too. Because I would always, I had a whole bunch of ideas that I wanted to get down, but I could never follow through with any of them.
Okay, so then you went to college, and when did this start taking shape? When you were in college? Or?
Yeah, I think it was the Christmas of my first semester I sort of had the idea for the characters, and that was back in 2013.
Okay. So what books did you enjoy in college? Were you do you enjoy history or sci-fi, of course? I mean, what books would you kind of recommend? Any authors? Do you have a favorite author?
I have a couple of favorite authors. When I was in college and now as a young adult, I've sort of gotten more into horror. So I've discovered that I really like reading Shirley Jackson novels.
Okay.
I like Neil Gaiman and Stephen King.
Okay.
And a lot of those, like Neil Gaiman and Shirley Jackson, I started reading when I was in college. So those are some of my current favorites.
Oh, and do you have any other future projects you're working on, or any ideas you're kicking around? Or?
I have 2 short horror novels written, and I'm working on a third that are all sort of related to each other. I haven't done much of anything with them yet, but I'm thinking about trying to self-publish those this time.
Oh, okay. Well, self-publishing,
yeah.
that could be a
Big
challenge.
step, yeah.
Well, then you're going to have to go out and hit the marketplace.
Yes.
Let's get a little bit more about the actual title, Dysfunctional Series. Now, it's 3 books in one. How did you come up with the title Dysfunctional?
I actually had a lot of the first book written before it had a title at all. Okay. I had a lot of trouble coming up with the title for this. I use music as an inspiration for a lot of stuff.
Oh, great.
So I don't even remember what particular song it was, but I was listening to one of my playlists that I had made, and the word dysfunctional had come up, and it was like a light bulb went off. I'm like, that's perfect for that'll be the series name, because the main characters all have some flaw that their superpowers sort of fix in some way. So they were all in some way dysfunctional.
All right. Well, once again, we're dealing with teenagers, and they're going through a lot of drama in their lives here.
Right.
So maybe we can get a little bit. Well, then, of course, the actual book, you got a cover here. Was this suggested to you by the publisher? Or?
They did make suggestions. I had some input as to, like what the characters looked like. But then there was a third party involved that designed the cover, and they sent me like 3 mock-ups of the cover for, me to give an opinion on. So I did have some say in what it looked like.
Sometimes you have to compromise with the publisher and work with that. Once again, it's a local company that the publisher? Or
no, it's not a local company. They're actually based out of Germany, but they
really?
yeah, I know. But they primarily work online. So their online platform is free for anybody to use and post their stories, which is what I did first.
Oh, great.
I just posted the first 3 stories on their website, and then once it got popular enough, they decided that they wanted to actually publish it through Amazon and offer physical copies that people could buy too.
So have you gotten much feedback from social media, or how does that work?
I've gotten some feedback, like Amazon reviews. I just recently had gone back to the high school that I went to and talked to a creative writing class, and some of the kids there bought books and read it, and I just heard back actually today that the couple of kids that read the book really liked it and read the whole thing over MEA weekend.
Well, great. Well, I mean, it is an easy read. I mean, it's fun. Maybe you could talk about who's this directed at? Is it for a younger audience, or?
I would say like 14 and older. So I know I've heard from some teenagers that I know that they really enjoyed it. But then I also know like my friends and my family who are all adults, they've read it too, and they also enjoyed it. So I probably wouldn't go any younger than 14 just because there are some dark subject matters.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, you're dealing with some people in a mental hospital.
Right, and
people do die in this book.
And the first episode, the one of the main characters, Theo, is really depressed.
Yeah, he's going through a lot.
Yeah.
We don't want to give too much away, but he did lose his family, and
yes. So he's been orphaned.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting how these characters interact. I mean, there's a lot of playing with going through the high school angst, of course, and your different factions. You got of course the sports people, and these people are kind of like nerds, would you say? Or
not necessarily. Theo was one of the soccer players.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So so these were all sort of people that normally wouldn't have been friends or talked to each other, and then after his family dies, and he has depression.
Then they're kind of drawn together through circumstances beyond their control.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yes.
Well, that is exciting. Maybe you can talk a little bit about each individual character, how they developed and how they started interacting. Did you, when you're writing this, you must have had some kind of idea where this was going to go, but what kind of excited you as you were writing this? How they started to work together, and how did that come together?
One of my favorite parts of writing this series in particular was having the dialogue and the banter between characters, and thinking of how they would interact with each other in certain situations. So a lot of the time I would write whole conversations first without any narration or descriptions, and then go back and then fill in the blanks. So a lot of the time when I'm trying to do character development, it's through dialogue and how they interact with other characters.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about the characters. The young lady here, Sally, she's kind of shy and withdrawn, would you say? But she has to she's kind of forced out because she's got this dynamic power, and it's kind of exciting how she kind of develops. Would you kind of say that she starts out kind of reserved, but then she's kind of pushed into the limelight, or?
She does start out kind of reserved, but she is also the character that has fatal insomnia, so she can't sleep. So a lot of the time she's reserved just because she's tired.
Right.
But I think her power really helps, sort of revitalize her, just because she's not tired all the time. She's like a human battery.
Right. Exciting. And like you said, there's some comic relief there where she finds out how to because she didn't know some of it. She gets some advice from, is it Ruben that gives her some advice?
Yes, so he's the one that figures out they all have these powers. So Sally was accidentally draining her cell phone battery and all these things and couldn't figure out why it was happening.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
So Ruben, because of his power where he can touch people and put himself into their shoes, he sees these odd things that these other characters have been going through, and he sort of puts 2 and 2 together and figures out what's happened.
Right, and then he's kind of the wisecracking guy, right?
Yes.
And Theo, he's more, he's really troubled. I mean, he's gone through hell, basically. And you could see that, he could really go off the deep end if he doesn't have characters drawing him in to kind of give him a focus, would you say?
Yeah, so they sort of become his support system, since he obviously doesn't have it in his family anymore, and he's withdrawn from his friends. And so having these other characters, push towards him because of circumstances out of his control, really helps, bolster him and pull him out of his depression.
Right. So I could see this. I mean, this is your age group, right? Basically, how did you develop the villains? I mean, these are older people. How did that come to you? What kind of influenced you to develop of course, the main woman character, Miss Briggs? How did that roll? I mean, how did her character develop?
I had actually initially intended her to be more evil than she ended up being. She sort of turned into a more sympathetic villain because the way her power works is that she has to steal the life from these other people, and if she doesn't, she'll die herself.
Right.
So
circumstances beyond her control. I mean, she has to do this.
At this point in the story, she has to do it, but they find out that she actually made the choice with one of the other villains, who is referred to as the Shadow Man.
The Shadow Man.
And he offered to give Miss Briggs these powers when she was a teenager herself. So she didn't really understand what she was getting into when she made that decision, and then. But
she also enhanced her beauty too.
Yes, that was the reason.
That could be enticing.
Yes. So she did make the initial decision to get these powers, but she didn't know what the cost was. So she sort of becomes
beware
a villain.
of what you're getting into.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right. That's true. Okay, and then the Shadow Man, of course, he's lurking out there, but you know he's going to be a significant character. And what inspired you for the Shadow Man?
I was actually inspired by listening to a podcast. So the job that I used to have, where I had to sit at a desk all day long, let me listen to all these podcasts while I was working. And so I would find these podcasts about like urban legends and paranormal stuff.
Sure.
And so one of the urban legends that was covered was shadow people. And so he kind of came about from those legends about people like waking up in the middle of the night and seeing this shadow person standing over them. And he was also I like the whole concept of making a deal with the devil. and being careful what you wish for in that sense. And so taking those two things and putting them together was how the Shadow Man came about.
I could see some influences there from Stephen King. I could see there, a Stephen King kind of a character. He's such a prolific writer. I mean, you could say, this could be inspired by this character or that character, but I mean, this is your own. I mean, but you've been influenced by Stephen King, you said, and maybe we can get into a little bit more about the influences, how these characters influence each other, and we got other characters too. These were the main characters. You want to talk a little bit about the other characters in this book?
Sure. So one of the side characters for the first book, anyway, her name is Jane, and she's one of Sally and Theo and Ruben's classmates. And she also gets superpowers at the same time as them, but she's a little more introverted, and so she's not already friends with them, and she doesn't happen to just run into them either. So she doesn't really know that something similar has happened to these other three classmates of hers. So she's very much isolated in that sense. And her superpower that she gets is that she can bring whatever she imagines to life. So she accidentally brings to life this alter ego of herself. And that's sort of setting that particular character up to become more fleshed out in book 2 and book 3.
Well, when you're writing these books, there's times when you go, wow, I never saw that coming. Or did you ever think, what I'm really surprised I went down that road? Or you basically had a pretty solid base, but you must have been a few times where you even surprised yourself where this went?
There were a few times that happened, especially when I got to book 3. The third book is called A Mighty Long Fall, and it's supposed to foreshadow one of the heroes becoming an antagonist. And so I remember when I got close to finishing the second book and close to starting the third one, I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I just started writing. And so the direction that character arc took me in was sort of surprising even to myself.
Well, I mean, it's an ambitious, but this is your first book, right?
That was the first one that, the first series that I completed and then put out into the world.
Well, I mean, I'm really excited for you because, I mean, I think you got a bright future. I mean,
Thank you.
What ideas are you formulating right now? I mean, are you going to continue in this format or fantasy, or do you project yourself getting into other genres?
I have plans to write more for this series in particular, but at the moment I'm more into the horror genre. So I've written 2 short novels that are horror novels, and I just haven't done anything with them yet. But that's sort of my favorite genre at the moment. Well,
I mean, it's exciting though. Right? Once again, I want to make sure people know how to get this book. They go online. You said they go to Amazon?
Yes, Amazon is the best way. So if you go into Amazon and you search McKenzie Rae, the Dysfunctional series will be the first thing that comes up in the results.
Okay, so now again, this is 3 books in one.
Yes.
So you can read the first book and put it down for a while and come back to the second one. I mean, you don't have to read this whole book overnight. Right. But I mean, it flows. I mean, it's really fun to read the first book, then take a break, regroup, read the second book, and I mean, it's a great challenge, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very excited. I'm really having fun with it. Now, I got to ask you, how would you project this? You think maybe they could make a movie out of this?
That would be so cool.
You'd sell the rights to Hollywood, right?
That would be amazing.
Do you see, like, would that? You think maybe 3 movies out of this, or how would you see that? Or do you think they could do it all in one?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think there's too much for one movie.
Right. Yeah.
Have to be at least 2.
Yeah, I'd go for 3.
Go for all 3.
Don't sell your short. Go for all 3. Well, McKenzie Rae, thank you for coming in and talking about the Dysfunctional series, books 1, 2, and 3, all in one book for the price of one, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'm Richard A. Klatte, host of Mary's Eclectic Interests. This is CCX Creates.
Local? CCX Media gives you the option to connect with your community on multiple levels. CCX Create welcomes you, community residents, to connect and experience television in an exciting way. The free TV classes we offer will have you on your way to creating TV, and our wide variety of content can be watched at home or on the go. Connect to what's happening in your community. Visit ccxmedia.org. Volunteering is more than just a word. It's a window to opportunities. Take Mark, for example. By taking free TV classes at CCX Create, Mark is helping bring entertainment and information to his community, along with building a foundation of skills that will take him one step closer to his dreams. Share your passion. Visit ccxmedia.org.